We feel like we've given some of the Star Wars movies short shrift when it comes to their rating because the Hisui scale has changed over time, but after over 100 episodes, we feel like we've really fine-tuned it.
So this year we will be revisiting all of the Star Wars movies in order from the highest Hisui scores to the lowest to make sure that our Hisui scale has been properly calibrated and giving another chance to some of those Star Wars movies that may not have fared too well on our first review.
So first up, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi.
How Star Wars is it?
Well, hello there, Mike.
Boy, oi, 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 Josiah.
And that's our new way we say hi in our new year of podcasting. This is our third year of podcasting.
That is really crazy.
Right? Or I guess one. No, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, like
this will be the beginning of the third year.
The number of the year is the third of them.
This is our third season of How Star Wars Is It?
Yeah.
I don't even know what the first episode of the third season is going to be, or if we've already recorded it.
Probably have.
I think we did, and we didn't realize it.
Like, what is
we're
a
giving
season?
Yeah, we're giving it. I made the season's year's worth of episodes, I think.
We literally have a definition of what a season is.
Technically, yes, because like
Got it.
when I upload them, it's like, what season is this? And I'm like, I don't know. The first year was 1, second year's 2, and I guess this one's gonna be 3.
We're post Lost. We're post like networks. We're the British model and the American models have completely merged. We're post Fleabag. You know, all of these things that we're defining what a season is. It could be anything.
It can be anything, and for us, it's just indeterminable. It's forever. It's forever.
But this
hi,
is How
listeners.
Star Wars Is It? It's the only podcast, as it turns out, and it's the podcast where we rate and review anything. It could be a movie, a TV show, whatever, a drink, a person, but not of how none of that thing's quality, but of its quantity of Star Wars characteristics.
That's right. We take everything Star Wars, books, movies, TV shows, all that. We put in one big Star Wars chili, and that's a 10 out of 10. So we are starting a new project, which you heard in the cold open. We are going back and watching all of the Star Wars movies again for business, not for pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's pulling teeth, frankly.
And we're going to re-rate them if they need to be re-rated. But some of them, like this first one, because we're starting with the highest rating we gave, which you gave Return of the Jedi a 10 out of 10.
Yes, because we felt like the most confident in our high scores, and then thinking back on ones that we gave like 5s and 6s, we were like, well, we've given food that high of a score, so maybe we should revisit these. And you mentioned the perfect 10 out of 10 is the chili of everything Star Wars, but there is one other thing that we have established is a perfect 10 out of 10, and that is this week's topic, Return of the Jedi.
That's true. We should honestly just be comparing everything to Return of the
How
Jedi.
Return
We could really shorten our intro if we were just like, we compare things to Return of the Jedi because it's the 10 out of 10.
Right.
So I
guess for this episode, first of all, I am. I'll show my hand a little bit, but I am not interested in lowering this score at all.
No, this absolutely will remain a 10 out of 10. I think this is sort of just to set our benchmark, so we can know going forward, like we remind ourselves what is a 10 out of 10, and how do these other movies stack up, and how Star Wars they are versus Return of the Jedi.
You know what would be smart is record all 11 of these episodes within like a week or two, and then space them out as we said, one per month. But the only problem with that is 11 months from now, we'll still be talking about being in quarantine. And God willing, we are no longer in quarantine by December.
And also, we have issues recording a couple weeks in advance, and then terrible stuff happens, and we're like, oh, shoot, should we talk? Well, we can't really talk about it because it already happened 2 weeks ago. We already recorded. So, who knows what 11 months would be?
Yeah, right.
We'd release an episode, and people would be like, wow, they're not even talking about the downfall of the United States as a nation. This is crazy.
The horrible tragedy that happened.
They didn't even talk about the 10-legged giant ants.
That crazy thing where the Prince George was in a hot air balloon that looked like it was going off course for a while.
He was reenacting Balloon Boy.
It's funny. We're predicting things that are going to happen in the future, and that is a little peek behind the curtain. We will be doing that as our game this week. We're going to be making some predictions.
I'm kind of excited about that.
But so yes, we're talking about Return of the Jedi again.
Okay, so I listened. I did end up re-listening to our last episode on.
Oh, good.
I listened to only the parts that applied for about on 1.5 times speed, which was funny listening to us talk that fast. So I'm going to try not to go over all the stuff that we already talked about, right?
Sure.
But I did notice some new stuff. Another thing that's pretty Star Wars is we have a difference in pronunciation with Jabba and Jabba. So right out the gate, we have the Oz and the As. The first note I wrote was, it's so dumb that it's another Death Star. Ha ha ha. Like right out the gate. Also, Mike, here's the thing. We're not lowering the score of 10 out of 10. But I know you joked earlier about how it was like pulling teeth to watch these movies, but like I was so profoundly uninterested in this movie this time. When
really?
I was incredibly bored the whole time.
You know what's funny? I had the exact opposite experience.
Really?
With my recent rewatch of Rebels and then a recent rewatch also of Rogue One, which of course we'll cover later, but I've just been like so
hyped.
Brainwashed by Star Wars that I'm just like, anything. Give me anything.
Give me anything. Well, and like this is supposedly my favorite Star Wars movie, but this time around I was like, is it? Like, I don't know, man.
That's funny. Well, the first note I wrote down while watching it, because I just went ahead and watched on Disney Plus instead of getting out my second disc of the widescreen special edition or full screen. I can't even remember. I think it was full screen special edition. The second disc is the original theatrical release, so you don't get all the bullshit in it. But I was like, I'll just turn it on Disney. And the first note I wrote down was, contains tobacco depictions, lol.
Yes.
And then I was like, wait, I feel like Josiah talked about this. And then when I listened to the episode, I was like, oh yeah, okay, so we've already talked about that.
That was the first thing I said.
But that is very funny to me.
It's so funny.
Because it's the only content warning. I don't even think it also said violence. I think it just said contains tobacco.
And also,
depictions.
It doesn't, because it's in space.
You're right.
And it doesn't have to be tobacco.
But we've covered this territory.
So okay, big notes.
Yes.
Overarching notes. I didn't like this movie as much this time. I thought it was boring and repetitive, and literally did everything that has been done in previous Star Wars movies in 4 and 5.
I noticed that too this time. Like, oh wow, they really did a lot of the stuff they had already established, and there were only 2 movies at that point.
Yeah, and overarching thing, the special editions are all bullshit and very annoying.
Whack.
And like, I don't want to be like, I never want to be a toxic Star Wars fan who's like me, I don't like this thing.
You're
but
right.
like, the special edition stuff, I understand why George wanted to go back and change some things. Like, why not? If you have the power to do so and you weren't satisfied, go for it. But like, the stuff they add onto this is like, what I wrote down was, it's the opposite of trimming the fat. It's like putting fat back on. It's like, how can we make this a little chunkier?
The weird thing is the 2 versions of what they've done to add things back in are, one is kind of minor textural things where it's something in the foreground or deep in the background that it's oh, we just didn't have the technology at the time to add a dozen more ships or whatever. So okay, fine, but that's not adding anything for me. And then the other thing they do is a complete batshit crazy ad, Cy Snoodles singing a song.
Insane.
You can't say that in 1983 you didn't have the technology to make a musical number, because that can't have been what you were going to attempt to do, and it was just the technology was prohibiting you.
And it's so that edition of Jedi Rocks is so strange too, because it's why did he think that's what we needed at that point? Because the movie has not been going on for very long at that point. We don't really need a comic relief moment of wow, look at these wacky aliens.
And just to go kind of in universe for a little bit, why would there be a song called Jedi Rocks? Because it would seem as though no one's ever heard of a fucking Jedi.
Yeah, and also Jabba's palace is a strange bar club scenario, because whenever Luke comes in, or maybe when it's Leia in her bounty hunter costume, people are just sleeping in booths, diner booths, and I was like, "What is this place? What do people do here?"
Did you watch Breaking Bad?
No.
Well, in one season, Jesse Pinkman is now like fully rich and buys a house and just like lets people come and like party there 24/7. And there's like a really great shot that's just like a time lapse of like, it could be an entire day, it could be like an entire week of just people coming and going, and it's just like a fucking like, you know, meth den.
So that's Jabba's palace.
Yeah, it does have a little of that vibe.
And not to spend too much time in literally in these first 10 minutes of the movie, but like I noticed for the first time the music that's playing like whenever R2 and C-3PO come in, and it's like classical circus music.
Baroque.
Yeah, like someone's playing like a piano. It's like and it sounds like it sounds like Bach wrote circus music, and I'm like, what's happening?
That's some Bach jizz right there.
Some Bach jizz right there.
So a couple of things that I wrote down that I'm sure are different things that we haven't talked about when we last talked about Return of the Jedi. One was a new Hisui indicator for this movie as to why it is a 10 out of 10. This could be the nail in the coffin. Like, if anyone ever challenges this, it's like, okay, here's the one piece of evidence that it's like, it's a 10, everything else is just gravy. At one point in the movie, C-3PO tells the story of other Star Wars movies to Ewoks.
That's true.
Like, the prequels are predicated on, like, the audience having seen Star Wars, and the sequels are the same thing. Like, both the audience and also the characters in the movies are like, oh yeah, we saw Star Wars.
Yeah.
And this is like the thing that started that.
I've been seeing a lot of stuff recently about like, well, so I made a TikTok for our show, everyone. This is the first time I'm talking about it on the podcast.
Follow us on TikTok.
Follow us on TikTok. I'm doing silly, dumb how Star Wars is it things, but I've been getting a lot of Mandalorian stuff. Since that's like, you know, the most recent Star Wars thing. And we've talked about this a little bit, but it's true, is that like Din Djarin is the Mandalorian is like someone who hasn't seen Star Wars in the Star Wars universe. And so he's bopping around and people are talking about stuff like it's really important. Like when Ahsoka's like, does he use the Force? And he's like, you mean
What's
his
that?
powers? Yeah, like he has powers. I don't know what you're talking about. And when Luke is there at the end and they're like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, it's Luke. And he's like, who the fuck is this? Am I going to give my child to you? I don't know who you are.
This guy looks like maybe he doesn't exist. He looks like he's maybe made out of clay.
He looks like he's half one person, but his face looks kind of mushy. I don't know. Yeah. But like that's the kind of stuff that I enjoyed in The Mandalorian, and that's the kind of stuff that I wish we'd get more of in Star Wars that we unfortunately don't.
Yeah.
Another thing I wrote down, just talking about the special edition stuff again, it's so strange because it's been a while since I've seen like you know, the VHS that I have or whatever. And so now I feel like brainwashed where I don't know what's real and what isn't real. Like there's part of me when I watched it on Disney Plus, I was like, I don't even remember what part, because like there was like the stuff where Boba Fett is like in Jabba's palace and there's like a lot of shots of him. And I'm like, I don't think those were in the original, but I don't remember anymore.
Yeah. I was seeing those too, that I was like, there are certain things like Jabba's eyes look like they've been retouched because they look really shiny. And then also there's like a handful of shots where there's someone like, again, like sort of close and out of focus, but close to the camera, like walking by. And it's like, I can't imagine when they shot that scene that someone walked right in front of the camera.
Yeah, it's so strange. What else we got? So like I took a lot of notes about in the Jabba's palace because that's when I was taking the most notes.
Yeah.
Oh man, but
me too. That's when I took all my notes as well. One of the things that they called out, or that you know, that's in the opening crawl, is that Jabba is a vile gangster.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wrote down, and the guys on the Star Wars Minute podcast made a sticker of this, but I have a sticker on my my resin casting pressure pot that is of two different characters who were creations that were Jabba the Hutt. One is the guy, the like Scottish guy that Harrison Ford shot with in the first movie, which they then cut and then again reinserted later with a CG version. But it was just this like big burly Scottish guy with like a fur vest.
Yeah.
And then the other is the comics. After the movie was such a success, the original movie, you know, they mentioned Jabba in the first movie.
Right.
So in the comics, we like meet Jabba and no one had defined like what he was yet. Like Lucas hadn't said he's a big slug man. So they made this other, like he's almost like a like yak face, If you remember that character, it was kind of like that. And so there's a sticker or, T-shirt or whatever called Vile Gangsters, and it's the two non-Jabba Jabbas. And I was like, that is the kind of weird inside baseball shit that I love.
I love that. I'm looking at it right now because that sounds amazing. So fun. So some overarching, like, why this is very Star Wars stuff again. What do we got? We said this in the first episode. They have everything in this movie. We have a badass villain getting unceremoniously killed by a blind Han Solo turning around.
But then we recently learned he wasn't killed.
Mm-hmm. But there is some like Jar Jar ass shit in this movie.
Yes, totally.
Like, we said this,
and people were so dumbfounded by Jar Jar being so silly, but this movie is like full of fucking Jar Jar.
There's so much. I mean, even in
Should that be our Patreon podcast? How Jar Jar is it?
Absolutely. Even in that scene, like blind Han Solo is essentially like doing Jar Jar shit that whole fight. Because he's like accidentally knocking things over. He's like saying stuff and being like, "Where? What? Huh?"
The last note I wrote before realizing like I'm not gonna take notes this whole time was, is Harrison Ford bad in this? Like
he kind of is, but not really.
So like stage hammy, like that story Luke told on the Music Man episode of like, hey, do like 30 times less. Like he felt like that.
I think that my theory is, and I remember I recently saw an interview with Mark Hamill where he was talking about like his interaction with Han Solo on the set of New Hope, where essentially Harrison Ford was like, it's not that kind of movie. Like, don't worry about
movie, kid.
Yeah, he's like, don't worry about continuity stuff. I feel like by the time Return of the Jedi came around, I mean, we all know that Harrison Ford doesn't give a shit about Star Wars and never really did. And so I think by the time Return of the Jedi came around, he was like, I don't care.
Right.
It's fun. Whatever. We're having fun. It's for kids, which like... He's right.
And I'm going to make a full wheelbarrow full of cash.
Yeah, right. I'm going to just cart this away, and I don't really have to work again if I don't want to.
One of the only other just like while watching notes I took is I just love that C-3PO, when he's talking to that little eye robot that comes out of the door at Jabba's palace, does that sort of like stumbling through translating thing. Like, C-3PO.
Yeah.
Bo... R2 Detoa, Moska Bishka Jabaduhat. Like,
yeah,
he's a translation robot, and he's like, how do you say?
Yeah, I had
such a cute detail.
to a realization about this, because we were talking recently, I think with about how with Michael Delaney about the fact that Anakin made C-3PO when he was a child. And so at some point he would have had to program into him the whole like, I can't read a Sith language that they reveal in episode 9. And then in this movie in episode 6 he says, it's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
Right.
And it's like, did little Anakin?
Like Anakin was either like a fucking prude, or the like processor chip he bought from Watto or whatever was like, this is like a prissy droid.
Here's my theory. So like most code, like my uncle is a programmer that does like not even like not like a hardcore programmer, but he works with computers and has to do code and stuff. And he was like, pretty much everything we use is copy and pasted from somewhere else on the internet.
Right.
And so you have to imagine that Anakin, when he was making it, was like, oh, he just Googled protocol droid and then he found the code and was like, yeah, this is fine. He works.
Right.
So that's probably why. But I just like the idea that if it was, and Anakin was like, what should he not be able to do? Shouldn't be able to pretend to be God. Right. That's got to be on the list.
Which is funny. It's almost like someone on the internet, or their version of the internet, has like read iRobot. Or like the other Asimov books that's like, okay, well, what are the rules for robots so that they don't like take over?
And like, did a droid at some point actually pretend to be God, and it created some real issues?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so this is skipping around a little bit, but since we're talking about that later part with the Ewoks, this goes also with some Jar Jar ass shit. The fact that Chewbacca, who is a sentient, intelligent life form, that has been shown to essentially just like, he's a person. He's a person. He gets tricked by a dead deer hanging from a tree.
Oh yeah.
And he like It's like he's Scooby-Doo all of a sudden. And Han says, always thinking with your stomach.
Yeah, they Scooby him a lot in those movies when it, like, makes sense to. You know, like, in Empire Strikes Back, like, Luke, like, scruffs him under the chin at one point.
Yeah.
It's like,
and like
he's a guy.
He's a guy. And it was just so, and, like, it felt so weird and against the character of, like, the ace pilot who, like...
Right.
is better at flying ships than Han is, when it's like, but he can be tricked by a nasty looking
like
half of a
meat.
deer.
Yeah.
I was like, that is some Jar Jar ass shit. This movie
is very Jar Jar-y. But it is original trilogy, so people still like revere it. So I mean, obviously, we're not keeping any secrets here. This is a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
I was watching some videos and Googling some like background facts about the movie that
yes,
like
please.
I feel like since we're revisiting the movie to just like talk about it again was like not enough without some I would say research, but that's giving myself an awful lot of credit.
I have not some research, but a new theory that I want to discuss with you afterwards to bring a new lens to this. So go ahead with those, and then we can
So, okay, there's probably like 5 or 10 little facts here that are just, you can tell them at cocktail parties. I guess
cocktail parties, remember those?
This was like the movie that George Lucas was like, okay, Steven Spielberg, please direct this.
Oh.
And Spielberg just like was like, I can't do that.
I don't want to.
Like, this is your thing. And then so like they wanted a director who's like good with actors, because that's like that's Lucas's like big shortcoming that's like very famously known at the time. So they hired Richard Marquand, but apparently he had all sorts of drama on set with like different actors, and Lucas being on set and sort of almost being a de facto like second unit director. So that's kind of just fun, interesting meta drama. Of course, it was originally titled Revenge of the Jedi, and they made stuff with that on it. So they would apparently it was so they would know if and where leaks happened. But I don't know if that
sounds like some bullshit
true.
that they made up after the fact. Whenever they
I
decided
agree.
To change
it's like how Tommy Wiseau later was like, "Oh yeah, The Room is a dark comedy." It's like, well, no, you meant for it to be like an earth-shattering drama, and people laughed at it.
Right.
It was released the very same day as A New Hope, just 6 years later. I thought that was kind of cool.
That's cool.
Ian McDiarmid was the second choice to play Emperor Palpatine. The first choice was an actual old guy. I can't remember now even what the name was, but it was some real old stage actor, and that was the hope. But I think he maybe couldn't do it because he was either ill or maybe he didn't want to do it. I can't remember. But the story with Ian McDiarmid that is kind of fun is he was a young kid. He was 30 or 20 something, and he just they put him in a bunch of makeup, and he projected his theater training and seemed old and scary. And then he was young enough to then 15, 20 years later play younger version of himself in the prequels.
I was thinking about this time around, because I was like, it's wild that that's the same actor.
Yeah, what
it's
a
crazy
nice guess.
Yeah, it really worked out.
You couldn't even attempt to plan that kind of thing now, because the idea to make a movie and then bank on yourself for making a prequel decades later is just such folly.
No, it'd be insane.
Let's see, what else? Okay. I think people are somewhat aware of this because I had heard this before, but the reason when Luke goes back to Dagobah, the reason that Yoda confirms for him that Vader is indeed his father is because child psychologists at the time had talked to George Lucas, or maybe he employed them to, weigh in, were people are not going to believe that is true because it came from a distrustful person. It came from the bad guy.
The villain.
So it for at least, some people, I would imagine, it took waiting 3 years to then see Return of the Jedi to be wait, it is true? Can you imagine waiting 3 years to watch a movie not knowing if the thing you just saw was real or not?
Do you think they had the same experience we had when we watched Rise of Skywalker, whenever it was revealed that Rey was a Palpatine? Do you think they had the same or different reaction of like, well, that's some bullshit.
That sucks.
Or if, because like, do you think they audibly booed like I did in the theater?
I
like,
don't think so, because the "I am your father" moment is like the first time anything like that had ever happened on film, and it was earth-shattering to Luke's character. He thought he was a nobody who was trying to make his way in the universe, only to find he's the son of the most evil guy, and like Rey had already like come to terms with who she was, and they're like, actually, just kidding, you're not that.
Yeah, you're the same thing that we did with Luke.
But worse and less significant. Three other little things on this list here of just background facts. This is why Family Guy's first Star Wars special was called Blue Harvest. That was the working title, the sort of publicized title of Return of the Jedi. It was called Blue Harvest with a subtitle of like Horror Beyond Imagination or something like that. Because people were like, okay, Lucasfilm is making another movie. It's 1982. Like they didn't want people like crashing the set or like getting leaked information. So they shot Return of the Jedi under a fake name. And all the little like, marker, like the little click action things said Blue Harvest on them. This is a fun one that I learned from Anthony Daniels on a YouTube video talking about all the different C-3PO costumes and how it evolved over the decades. They had like a rubbery latex one for stunts. So falling off of the barge, Jabba's sail barge in the Dune Sea, when he fell out of that, it was like a rubbery one. And the stunt performer in that was a woman. And she then later, either in the same day or in the same sequence of shooting, was also the stunt performer for Leia holding on to Luke swinging off the barge. So she was two different characters falling or swinging off of Jabba's barge.
Busy day for her.
Busy day for her.
A lot of range.
It probably was multiple days now that I think about it. And then the only other thing that I have here is it was the first ever movie to use the THX sound system, which had been in development between Empire and this, and basically Lucasfilm held the movie ransom from theaters and said you are not getting Return of the Jedi unless you upgrade your facility to have THX compatible speakers and system.
So they could say the audience is now deaf.
Yeah, thud. Which is like, hey, good for you guys. Like you had the biggest bargaining chip in the world, the end of Star Wars.
For reals. Speaking of the end of Star Wars, so to go on some more meta kind of how Star Wars is at stuff, the sequel trilogy mines a lot from this movie is something that I realized on this turnaround, on this watch, because also watching it this time around, I mean, for how bad, here's the thing. People on the internet are now like to pretend that the prequels are like good movies, and like they're not. They're fun. They're not really well made in some ways, but they're like fine and they're fun and like they fit into Star Wars pretty well. But one thing I will say in the way that they are good is that they take things in this original trilogy and give them more context, because like Obi-Wan says to Luke, what I told you was true from a certain point of view.
Right.
And like the last conversation he had with Luke's dad was, Anakin being like, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, that kind of stuff. Like they literally,
then you are lost.
Like that's intense. Yoda says to Luke, the last of the Jedi will you be, the last Jedi. He talks about how your family is powerful with the Force. Like the stuff that, it is families. It is not like, it's bloodline. Like it's not a nobody from Nowheresville. It's bloodline. That was very well established in the original trilogy, which it sucks. So like, honestly, JJ was really sticking to the script when he came in and kind of retconned things in Rise of Skywalker to the negative for this franchise as a whole, because it would have been nice to break away from that.
Right. In fact, when we do this episode, but for The Last Jedi, which I love, we might knock it for that because it's like one of the only Star Wars movies to ever be like, actually, it could be anything. Like, even in A New Hope, Obi-Wan says, like, the Force is what gives a Jedi his power, and he also tells Luke he's the son of a great Jedi warrior. So, like...
It's like this movie establishes all that so hard, and the sequel trilogy mines it and like takes it all and like remixes it for better and for worse. One last thing to say maybe before we go to the pit. I noticed something this time around, and this might be something that like everybody has known, but it was very cool to me because in Empire you have Darth Vader basically doing the whole like, join me, Luke, we'll rule the galaxy, we'll overthrow the Emperor, we'll be in charge, right? And so we know that Vader has these thoughts of like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if it was me and my son in charge instead of me and the Emperor? So you know that he doesn't like, there's not really love lost for the Emperor, right?
Yes.
There's some really cool, very specific dialogue in every scene with the Emperor and Vader, where like the Emperor will be like, yes, bring him to me. And like Vader never says, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to do this. He only ever says like, he'll meet his destiny. He's going to come to me. And even like you can see which is paralleled in Last Jedi with Snoke and Kylo and Rey.
Yeah.
There is some, you can tell that Vader is thinking one thing because he is saying things to Luke to bait him and bring him out so that the Emperor will think that he is going to do what he wants him to do.
Yeah.
But, and then you can sort of, let me see what I wrote down here. Also, the lightsaber battle in this versus the first time that, the last couple times that they fought, like, it's interesting because you now know that like Vader was never trying to kill Luke.
Right.
Like, and so like that's part of the reason why those lightsaber battles weren't good is because Vader didn't actually want to kill his son.
He's just playing defense. Yeah.
Yes. And okay, yeah. Like the Emperor, like, asks him, when Luke says, I can sense the conflict in you, there is good in you, Vader says, there's no conflict. He doesn't say there's no good. He says there's no conflict. And so everything, he says, if you will not fight, you will meet your destiny. So he's hiding the truth from Palpatine by masking his words, being very specific to not say, I'm going to kill you, right?
And so, Ghost Obi-Wan tells Luke, like, bury your feelings deep down. They could, hurt your friends or whatever. And then Vader even says, when he's like, sister.
Yes.
And he's like, your feelings have now betrayed them. Like, he's telling you, if you don't bury your feelings deep down, people are going to figure it out. Like, look at me, for example.
And I think that, so you can see, watching, you can see that Luke literally closes his eyes and kind of makes like a face. And in that moment, and I read it as like he is thinking out loud very hard, I have a sister, you have a daughter. And then Vader picks
like
that.
Deliberately telling Vader.
I think he is, because then Vader says that, and he baits Luke into coming out and getting really mad. And so this is kind of going into my new theory, my new fan theory, which I don't know if this might be something that people already know about. But I think that Vader literally set all of that up in order to bait Luke to go at him really hard, and then in order to bait the Emperor into trying to kill Luke, so that the Emperor would then be distracted enough that Vader could make his move.
Wow.
Because you can see Vader, after he gets his hand chopped off, really wait until, like, he looks at the Emperor and looks back at Luke to looks at Luke and then looks at the Emperor, and the camera cuts to the Emperor being like cackling, laughing, while doing the cackling thing while he's lightning him, and you can see that Vader's going, okay, now he's completely distracted. He's not putting his mind into me at all. I can make my move.
Wow.
And like, I had never,
chess.
Yes, I had never
3D
noticed any of
chess.
that. And I don't know if any of that was intentional, but the way that Vader talks, and very specifically not saying like, oh, I'm going to kill him, feels intentional.
Yeah.
And
I really like this read.
And one last thing, it makes the special edition no,
yeah,
even worse of an addition,
even
because
worse.
That's annoying, because he's not saying no.
That
he's literally
sounds like he's deciding right then and there,
exactly.
as opposed to he has had and so now my question is, when did he make up his mind about this strategy? So after A New Hope, in the recent Star Wars comics from the last 4 or 5 years, he hires Boba Fett, the bounty hunter, to find who was this hotshot who blew up the Death Star. And when he comes back to him, he's like, I don't know much, but I have a name. And he tells him Skywalker. And then you see the last panel, the big splash panel, is Vader staring out of a big window, and his fist is clenched, and the window is the glass is splintering. He's realizing all right then and there, all the pain of oh, I have a kid. He's destined for greatness, blah, blah, blah. So maybe even before Empire Strikes Back begins is when this version of Vader that you're talking about it's when he's like, okay, I got to make a plan.
Well, and I think it's also, I think that like this read of Vader isn't necessarily him turning good. It's just him saying, I am going to kill the Emperor.
Yes,
because
I'm going to do the Sith thing and kill my master.
Yes, and then I think the only thing he decides in the moment is it's okay if I die, because that's the only thing in the moment that I think he decides when he saves Luke.
Yes,
is that he's like, I wanted to kill the Emperor, but it's okay if I die because
it's
at
not
this point,
him realizing he wants to save Luke because he already wanted to save Luke, but it's realizing that he's okay dying if it means his son can live.
Exactly.
Like, it's
and
when
so
he goes from the plan to like nice person and disregarding his plan.
Because the plan originally was like, I'm going to save Luke and I'll kill the Emperor and
As
then maybe we'll control the galaxy. And then the plan becomes, okay, I'm going to kill the fucking Emperor as long as my son survives this, that's okay. And so like
that's really interesting. And speaking of control the galaxy, and this is something I've thought about with all the different generations of Star Wars, what does that look like?
Yeah.
The Emperor doesn't seem to be having any fun, and if I were like in charge of the whole galaxy and I had the resources to build 2 Death Stars, I would definitely be in like a beach.
Yeah, like take me to a beach planet.
What does the Empire look like other than the military stuff that we're exposed to, the stormtroopers and the officers? Like, what does Coruscant look like that's like fully firmly under Imperial reign? Because like there must be like an upper class that's reaping the benefits of this, fascist government and just like having the time of their life. But like all we see are like scoundrel casino type shit, and that's like the closest to like lap of luxury. Like what is there like a Jeff Bezos equivalent?
That's funny that we talked. This takes us to Last Jedi again, because that's an answer that is given in Last Jedi, right? But then, because in these movies, Darth Vader is like never like his quarters are very austere. Like
he's only ever unhappy. That's he's how never, the Empire keeps him his servant, basically.
And like it would make sense for like the troops or whatever, like if they're all like having shitty, but like the second in command of this entire, he doesn't even have like a couch,
right?
Like he doesn't have a TV, nothing.
Like who has a nice life?
No one,
because
apparently.
Certainly someone must, right?
Okay, hold on to get it, because this will take me into one of our game things, because I do have an answer or a question, rather a prediction. So should we jump into the pit? Because that was kind of the end of my.
We definitely should.
That was the end of my theorizing. Let's go to the pit.
All right, Jabba, last chance.
You should have bargained.
Yeah, right. Then like nods at R2. R2 shoots the lightsaber up, and then we jump in the Sarlacc pit. Wait,
that's a cool
that's
green
really
light. Yeah, this is fine. We're Boba Fett. Jump in.
Woo! That's the Wilhelm scream.
Okay, I'm ready. Hey, we're back.
We're back. Our Sarlacc.
man.
Welcome back, listeners. And you probably didn't even hear any break there because we haven't had ads in a while.
Yeah, we haven't. Woo!
So this week for our sort of game slot, since we've already done this movie before, we decided to make some predictions. Now, I mentioned on a recent episode that I've been reading the Empire Strikes Back edition of the book from a certain point of view, and Josiah and I both read the A New Hope version of that. So basically a background here. It's this big, thick book that came out with the 40th anniversary celebration of A New Hope. And it was 40 short stories celebrating 40 years. And each story takes place during the run of A New Hope, but from the point of view of someone else. So there's a story of Obi-Wan in exile talking to Ghost Qui-Gon. And there's a story, in fact, I think even of Yoda in the first one. And then there's also, there's stories of like Jawas, and there's a story of...
the mouse droid.
Yeah, right, a mouse droid on the Death Star. So the Empire Strikes Back book has also just come out, and there's some other great stories in there too. In fact, there's a story from the point of view of the worm, like the big slug and the asteroid, which I think I actually kind of skimmed over. I was like,
sure,
this isn't.
There was one of the trash compactor monster.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
the Dianoga. So our game here today is we are going to make predictions for what those kind of tangential points of view stories are going to be in the inevitable Star Wars Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view, which, if tradition would now hold, given what they've established, it would come out in 2023.
Yes. So yeah, we've got a couple each. We just want to go back and forth.
Yeah, I've got just like a little short like sentence or two to like explain my idea.
So I already mentioned this a little bit, but my first one I think is very important. Is I want to know, and I think it's the Rodian in Jabba's palace at the very beginning when C-3PO and R2 come in, that's playing the circus Bach music, and I would like a certain point of view from him, because I want to know what the hell that music is, why it's so different than every other music that we've heard.
Right. Like, is it from a like classical composer analog?
Yes. Is this the classical version of music? Because that's what it sounds like. So I want it from him. I think it's the Rodian because he's standing at something that resembles maybe an instrument, but you don't really get to see it very much. That's my first one. That's my first one. I gotta know what classical music is in the Star Wars universe.
I have a bunch of like half-cooked ideas, or at least like thoughts of what is going to be included, all from Jabba's palace. I wrote down the Door Eye, the robot guy. Yeah. I wrote down Bib Fortuna will surely have something. I wrote the manager of all the droids who makes R2 the bartender. I think that would be a fun story.
Okay,
Salacious
speaking of,
Crumb, but here's my actual pitch, which is funny because it's similar to your thing. The band, the Jedi Rocks band, Cy Snoodles and Max Rebo. I want like so my favorite stories in those books are like the funny ones, and in Empire it felt like there were even fewer funny ones than there were in A New Hope, but I want it to read sort of like a documentary, like behind the music type thing of the Max Rebo band.
This is like, Spinal Tap, but it's like, Max Rebo band.
Yeah, right. Like maybe it's like the days leading up to them playing at Jabba's, and that's their big break into the scene. Or maybe that was like par for the course for them, and it's sort of like we just recently covered Pixar's Soul, that it's like you play the jazz show and then what's next? You play it again next, tomorrow night or whatever. That it's just like another day of their like shitty musician grind.
Yeah. So going off of
the R2 bartender droid.
Oh yes, going off of like how their plan is like we've said before.
Oh my god, their plan is so bad.
Their plan is ridiculous. They're so lucky that that R2 was A, made a bartender droid, and B, put on that skiff, because like what if the guy had decided anything else?
Yeah, let's get rid of this droid.
R2 could have probably gotten there on his own because he's like clever.
Yes.
Okay, and speaking of, this is one of my half-baked ones. Is I want one from the point of view of the droid that's getting his poor little feet burned. Because I want to know that just is actually, maybe it's just medical and it's not torture.
Oh,
so maybe he's just screaming because ouch, it hurts, but thank you so much, you're fixing my feet.
Right, my plantar fasciitis.
It's so sad when it happens.
Yeah, it is very sad.
Do you want to do snake order? You can or never mind, because I just kind of did one anyway. Let's just keep going back and forth.
Yeah. Okay, my other Jabba's palace story I think will happen is Malakili, the Rancor Keeper, the big tubby guy who cries when the Rancor gets killed. I want to see like the whole backstory. He like got a little baby Rancor and he like trained it and
this
got hired by Jabba.
I don't know if I noticed this before. The Rancor makes like a very sad, like dog-like panting noise as it dies. It's
like a pretty rough scene.
It's actually very sad, and the fact that he cries, like it's like, this fucking sucks.
Yeah,
that was it's so sad. Oh yeah, one more from Jabba's palace. This was similar to yours. I want to know, and this is only for the special edition, I guess, but I want to know about the three backup singers. You know, yeah. I'm like, what are they doing? Are they part of the band all the time? They just live here in Jabba's palace, you know?
Also, I bet you this book will have a shitload of Jabba stories. I mean, it's like somewhat balanced, but in the Empire one, it was just like so many different stories of like the rebels on Hoth, and after like fourth or fifth, I was like, okay, let's get to Dagobah.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense because there's the most characters in Jabba's palace. Like after that,
exactly.
it's kind of nothing until there's the big rebellion meeting, and then you're like, oh, there's a lot of people again.
Which was another note I wrote that I didn't end up like making one of my official choices. But you know the two rebels that are in the hallway as they're walking to that meeting? Like that's one of my favorite jokes in the Family Guy special. Is it's that shot, the camera kind of going over those two people walking into the bigger room, and like right before the camera crosses their plane, the one guy goes, "No, me first," and like pushes the one guy aside to get through the door before him. Okay, so my next one was, and then I think we're off Tatooine after that. Well, maybe that's not true. Because the asteroid slug had a story and the Dianoga had a story, I'm sure the Sarlacc will. And I wrote, maybe it has like a tongue-in-cheek reference to having a beak, but sometimes it just doesn't poke the beak above the surface of the sand dune, and sometimes it does. And then I also said maybe it's like internal monologue is about the like beings living inside of him, and maybe in one of the beings or two of the beings could have a little like man cave set up in there like you and I did in our old Anchor ads.
What if we're in it?
Yeah, maybe.
Something that's interesting that was like weird to think about, right, is that like the bigger a creature is, it experiences time differently.
Right.
Because time is affected by gravity, which is weird, and all sorts of stuff, right? Because we made all these things up. But like an elephant's heartbeat is so slow, and like a human's heartbeat is like, you know, sort of, we think it's normal. A Sarlacc heartbeat, if it has one, is probably incredibly slow. Right. And the way it experiences time might also be incredibly slow. So like, what if
said that like if you fall in there, it takes like 10,000 years to be digested or whatever, whereas it takes us like a day to fully digest food.
Yes, which
like,
is so like what if its certain point of view story is like century spanning in the real world, but to it's like a fucking weekend.
I like that.
And in that weekend, it's like, and then I ate a lot. This one day, I ate a lot.
Yeah, but again, like a day for it, like a day of our day for it is like in a second. Like, and then like right at the last second of that like day of my life, I had just like a bunch of guys.
I ate a bunch of guys, and it was the last bite of my meal for that week.
Yeah.
And I ate a bunch of guys. And then I lived forever.
I like that.
Okay, yeah. I'm off of Jabba's palace now. Here's what I want. And I'm sure these guys all have names, but I refuse to look them up. You know, okay, you've got the Imperial Guard, right, that walks on with the Emperor.
Uh-huh.
You know the weird looking like grandpa guys with the funny hats that are walking behind him?
Yeah. That are like foreign dignitaries. Like they're not like imperial looking.
Yeah, I want those. I think they're the ones that are living in the lap of luxury from the Empire, and so I want their take, because they're like his posse or something, and we see them for 2 seconds, and they look like a bunch of grandpa guys wearing funny hats, and I want to know what their deal is.
That's a great one. I realized I am still on Tatooine here, and then I have a whole bunch of half ideas, but I wrote maybe a Boba Fett story now that we know through The Mandalorian that he's still around. Like maybe we get the story of him, the official now Disney canon story of Boba escaping the Sarlacc. Maybe we see how and why he was separated from his armor, and that made its way to the hands of Cobb Vanth by way of Jawas, you know, like, and also maybe why he stayed on Tatooine so long, or maybe he didn't stay on Tatooine that long. Maybe he was off-world and then he came back to get his armor. Like, we can maybe see his basically his Mandalorian backstory.
That's really fun. I like that. And also that reminds me of another thing about how the Mandalorian doesn't know Star Wars. Like whenever Boba Fett's like, they'll probably know my face, and we as the audience are like, oh yeah, he's a clone.
He's
and
a
like
clone.
But I wonder what everyone else in that situation was like. Why? What are you talking about? Why would they know your face? Let's see. Oh yeah, I'm way ahead in the movie now, so
yeah, go ahead. I make a huge jump.
Okay,
after
this is a
all
huge
the
jump
Tatooine
to
stuff.
Ewoks. I want to know the very small Ewok, the baby one that's in the little thing, and he it's very obviously a hand puppet.
Yeah, like a hand.
I want it just I want baby Ewok story,
really
and
cute.
it's gonna be great.
I have a whole bunch of just like mini bullets, but the next story. So hang on, those are maybe another story of Ghost Obi-Wan on Dagobah talking to Yoda before Luke gets there again. Maybe that, like I said, the rebels in the hallway before the meeting with Mon Mothma. Maybe Mon Mothma or Akbar themselves. Maybe the Imperial guy who says it was an older code, sir, but it checks out.
It checks out. And he's like,
maybe
that's gonna be a
Wicket.
meme.
Maybe Nine Numb, the co-pilot to Lando. Maybe
Oh.
Wedge and all those guys. But here's my actual one.
Okay.
The guys, the Imperial guys, be they officers or troopers or whatever, who Luke turned himself over to on Endor. Because, like, that must have just been such a gift. And so here's my thought. These guys have not ever had anything go their way.
No.
But they've always been really close. They were the troopers who knocked on the door on Tatooine in A New Hope, like saying, oh, this one's locked, go to the next one. They just missed getting the droids. They were with Vader and the Echo base right as the Falcon was flying away. They were the ones who were the snow troopers setting up the like tripod gun, and they, they just didn't get there in time. And then they're like, man, nothing's ever going to work for us. And then, like, who shows up to them on a fucking silver platter? Luke Skywalker.
I love that.
And I think even Vader says in that little, like, gantry that he walks down to get Luke, I think he even says, like, good work.
Yeah.
And they're probably like, ah!
And they're played by Adam Pally and Jason Sudeikis or whoever did it in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, right.
I have one because I realized another mispronunciation thing. It's Admiral Akbar, and he's just practicing saying, he's like, it's Lando, right? Lando Calrissian. He's practicing saying it, and then when he gets into the meeting, he says, General Calrissian, and then he's like, fuck, I got it. He's like, I was practicing, and I said it wrong. But going off the Empire thing, this is my real one. I want the whole preamble of the guy, the officer that when Han and Leia and them are in the actual like shield generator thing the first time and they get caught. The one that when he runs up and he holds up his pistol and he goes, you rebel scum.
Yeah.
Because that's all he says. He doesn't say, stop, you rebel scum, or got you, you rebel scum. He just goes, you rebel scum.
Yeah.
Which is such a silly thing to say.
Yeah.
Because that's not, you're not saying like, we got you. You're just saying like,
yeah,
you rebel
He's just
scum.
offended by his existence.
Yeah, and I want the whole I want the precursor to that of him being like really pumped that he's just gonna fucking give them. He's like, I'm gonna finally tell them what I think. Like I've never gotten to see a rebel in the flesh, and I'm gonna really give it to him.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna call him scum. There, I said it.
The only other thing I wrote down is an actual like realistic prediction, because at the end of the first. From a certain point of view, there is a story that is, like the original title for Star Wars was something like The Star Wars, The Tales of Anakin Starkiller as written in the Journal of the Wills, or something crazy long like that. And so the last story of that first book was the man writing the Journal of the Wills, and it was basically just the writing of the opening crawl of Star Wars with this other person chiming in, calling attention to like poorly phrased things or things that didn't make sense. So it was this like conversation back and forth, like critiquing and making fun of the opening crawl. They did another one of those for Empire. So my guess is that the last story of the Return of the Jedi is absolutely going to be one of those, which like isn't like so fun of a guess because it's almost a sure thing, but I figured I'd include that here at the end.
My last one is a hopeful revisionist history against the special editions. And it's just the person who wrote Yub-Nub. It's the Ewok who wrote Yub-Nub. Or maybe the band of Ewoks that are playing on the Stormtrooper helmets. Yes. Or it's just the song Yub-Nub written out, because it was a glaring omission again this time
sucks, man.
when I watched it, because it's just such generic like nothing music.
And we see all the other planets.
All the other planets. It's so stupid, and I just want Yub-Nub back. And so I hope that somehow someone. It's so dumb. Oh yeah, put Yub-Nub back.
It's just like boring.
It's boring. It's nothing. It doesn't, and it also doesn't match the rest of the movie.
No.
Like, it doesn't feel John Williams-y.
It doesn't.
It's so weird. But yeah, so that's my that one's less of a prediction and more of just a really deep hope.
Yeah.
Is that they write Yub-Nub in somehow.
Yeah, right.
It's just the lyrics of Yub-Nub. That's all.
So that was our predictions for when they hopefully make that book.
Yes. And so, well, let's see. I mean, we're coming to a close here. Did you have any other notes that you wanted to just mention about why this is this most Star Wars thing?
I'm trying to see if I do here.
Okay, here's one of the reasons why it's so Star Wars too, is that like this thing, like I said earlier, the sequel trilogy mines this movie for a lot of stuff. And so this movie is like very Star Wars, but it's also for its time, but it's also like preemptively very Star Wars, like in the way that it sets the pattern for everything else.
Right. It sort of like I can almost picture people like doing the 1981 equivalent of this podcast, which is like, wow, that movie wasn't anything like the first one. Like the first one was like fun and silly and like adventure and hope, and the second one was like dark and scary and like maybe the bad guy is the good guy's father. Like, what is this? Like they were having this same conversation that we have every week, and then Return of the Jedi was like, here's what it is, guys. It's sort of like when Brad Bird did Mission Impossible 4 and was like, okay, guys, it's going to be silly gadgets, but it's also going to be like big scary stunts. And then after that, Christopher McQuarrie being like, okay, we know what all it can be. Let's add Ilsa, and then we're good.
Yeah. It's like it's sort of the, you know, in geometry, right? Or in like math or whatever,
yes.
you need
when you have a theorem and then you have to prove it.
Yeah, and even less than that, even like stupider than that, because I'm a dumb is like, you know, you need 2 points are just 2 points.
Yes.
And then you need a third point in order to like make a shape, you know?
Right.
And so like the first two are like, well, there's this and there's this, but we don't have a pattern yet. It's like the improv thing too, where like the first person to do something sets something. The second person to do something can either do the same thing or something different. And then it takes the third person to actually set a pattern of like, oh, this is what we're doing.
Right.
And so that's what this movie did, is it made the pattern. It was like, this is the pattern. This is what Star Wars is. You know?
Yeah. The first person can say A. So the second person could say B, or it could say E, and then the pattern is vowels, or it could say 1, and the pattern is like the first of things. Or if it's A and then 1, the third person could do the first of some other thing, like maybe red, or they could say steak sauce.
Yeah, or they
And
could
then
say
the
A
pattern
again,
repeats.
right? And in this case, they said A again.
A1, A.
A.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love that geometry reference too, because like 2 points is at best a segment, 3 points is a triangle. If 4 are equidistant, it's either a square or a rhombus, and 5 you get pentagon. If they're all equidistant from one another, you start filling in more and more points, and all of a sudden you got yourself a circle.
Okay.
Hashtag Circlegate.
Hashtag Star Wars is circles. Also, this is, I love that that's where you were going with it, but my mind jumped to something so absolutely not related, which I'm going to try to say really fast before we start.
Not related to circles?
Well, it's related to circles. So there, have you heard of this thing where there's like language clouds, essentially, where because of like machine learning and AI and our computers that we have that are very advanced nowadays, you can essentially plug in languages and all their words and their relationships to each other, and they create sort of like a 4-5 billion dimensional cloud in computing, to where the relationship between, for instance, woman and queen is the same in every language. Like if there's a word for it, that space between them, you'll be able to
the same distance or whatever.
Yes. And so you can interpret languages by having a cloud of those the words, and it's pretty accurate. And the thing that's crazy is the clouds all end up looking very much the same, even in languages that don't have anything in common, like Japanese and like English and stuff.
Right.
That's a really bad way of explaining it. But
because words within a language have the same relationship to one another,
exactly.
Generally, yeah,
exactly. And so and there's
is this a classic Hasui episode where at the hour mark we start talking about linguistics?
It might be. But what I want now is a Star Wars cloud, and so each movie has these relationships, right, that are like the same distance apart.
There's the sneaking around quotient.
Yes, so this is I say what I want. That's what this podcast is.
Yes.
Is like, that's my theory, is that if you put each of these movies in that same kind of cloud, they would all look pretty much very similar. At least the 4, 6, and 7 would look exactly the same.
Yeah, right.
And then like each other one would have variations on it. And I think like if we like that's what we're doing is trying to figure out what that cloud is without a computer. And
yeah,
if we
right.
only...
We are trying to be AI computing technology, but we literally have to think it out in real time, and we also don't have any real like written record of any of this work. It's just like recorded audio.
And we're also not that smart, so it's like
and
hard.
we're not trying super hard.
Yeah. So anyway, all that to
Plus,
say,
there's gonna be like a good portion of that 100+ hours that's just us making rhymes with Alexander Hamilton.
yeah. I was gonna say unfortunately, but honestly, that's a gift. So fortunately for everybody. Well, it's gonna be a 10 out of 10. Do we want to give it a unit of measure again, or should we just?
Yeah.
What did we do? Should we do the same units of measure?
I can't remember. I think I did like Sarlacc burps, which I want to do a different thing.
You did Sarlacc burps. I did salacious crumbs.
Yeah. Or maybe I did those little like slimy guys that Jabba eats.
I think you did Sarlacc burps because you did the same. You said you were going to do those when I said salacious crumbs, and then you changed your mind.
Let's see. Which do I want to do this time?
Well, I just talked about it earlier off mic, but I'm going to do it now because I'm going to ham-fist it in. I'm going to do Ayas of the Ewoks because they do the exact same one 1,000 times, and it's like, George, if you were going in and doing all these special editions, couldn't you have gotten a couple different takes of that one instead of it being the exact? It's like the Wilhelm scream, but it's the same thing over and over.
It's like
again.
Utini.
Yes. Okay.
I'm gonna do while we're on the Ewok thread here. Like tons of strength.
Yeah.
Because you need like 1 ton of lifting strength to make all the shit that the Ewoks made.
Absolutely. They are the most powerful creatures in Star Wars, confirmed.
Yeah.
Actually, I did see this.
Inconceivably so.
This is once again tangential, but there was this TikTok that someone I'm on Star Wars TikTok a lot now since we made one, and this one creator did this really great thing where she calculated. She was like, Padme Amidala is the strongest, most powerful person in Star Wars, confirmed, and so she calculated the amount of force that in episode 2 when she jumps off like that
like pillar in the
pillar thing that
gladiator.
When they're in the gladiator arena,
yeah.
And she jumps off that onto Anakin's like mount, behind him,
and just lands straddling the
She calculates the amount of force that her pelvic bone would have hit it with, and it's like it's something like 40,000 newtons or something, which is like a million, like so many more times more than it takes to just break your leg. And so she's like,
so funny.
It's confirmed that she is a strong. So I want her to do similar calculations, but for Ewoks, because we've seen Stormtrooper armor get broken before and them get knocked out, but like, I want to know how that little bear is doing.
And like I think I may have even mentioned this before, but Mythbusters did the like 2 trees ramming into the chicken walker thing, like just lifting those trees into like a 90-degree position.
So I'm gonna go ahead and give it 10 out of 10.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give it 10 tons of Ewok strength.
And there we go. We did our first one of the year.
Yeah, right. Our first revisit of a Star Wars movie. So I think we're still good on our Hisui scale calibration. It's more the ones more in the fall
bottom.
and winter of this year that I think we're going to realize we did dirty the first time around.
Yeah, we wanted to start strong because we know for sure this is a 10 out of 10. So. Yeah. Do you want us on the internet? If you do, go follow us at How Star Wars Is It on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. I'm trying to game the algorithm to get new followers. And maybe some
do
of them,
a TikTok that's just
I think I am going to post one about the Darth Vader theory I have to see if anybody else has already said that. But it's fun. It's dumb. We're having fun over there. Go check it out. And
email us at agoodpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from people.
Yes, please.
Tweet at us. Instagram at us. You should also give us a review, for God's sakes.
If you haven't already. And if you have, then steal someone's iPhone and do it on theirs.
Please steal.
Please steal for us. Please. What else? Anything else? I think.
Oh gosh, when is this? This is February. It won't be done by now, probably. But I am in the middle of shooting and editing a new toy making video. So
hell yes,
that's maybe something to look forward to.
Hell yes. Cool. So, and I have nothing else going on except this show because I'm unemployed. Anyway, so hiya. Let's see. We should probably it's just time for saying bye-bye.
Yeah. Oh man, my unit of measure should have been tobacco depictions. It is about time for Tubby bye-bye.
Okay, well then, like we always say,
we love you, and may the fourth be with you.
I wanted to give him a little kiss. A little kiss for the listeners.
Bye.
Bye. I was gonna say this earlier. We were talking about special edition stuff, but like since it's past, we don't have to put it in the podcast. But the fact that they use the same, it's like they've changed so much stuff, and they use the same Ewok 8 times. And it's the exact same recording.
Yeah.
Like it's like 1,000. And I'm like, what? You couldn't have gone back and
really
changed
weird.
those?
Yeah.
All right. Anyway.